fifth reading comes from Luke 2, verses 8 through 16. In that region there were shepherds living in the fields, keeping watch over their flock by night. Then an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for see, I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign for you. You will find a child wrapped in bands of cloth and laying in a manger." And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and on earth peace among those whom he favors." When the angels had left and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now to Bethlehem and see this thing that has taken place, which the Lord has made known to us." So they went with haste and found Mary and Joseph and the child lying in a manger.
This Christmas Eve story was written by Ted Loder, the senior minister of Philadelphia's First United Methodist Church of Germantown. Reverend Loder has written several books, and this story comes from one of his books called Tracks in the Straw. Tom writes, "Every chance he gets, which is too often, a friend of mine says, the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. He swears the saying is original, but I'm sure he picked it up somewhere. At first I chuckled, Ted writes. When he said it now, I rolled my eyes. I know if it really was the end of the world as he knows it, he wouldn't feel so fine. At least I know I wasn't feeling fine that night, Ted writes, 3 days before Christmas, as I drove through the rain and sleet to meet my daughter Karen for a late supper at a city center tavern that she liked. The world I knew was ending, not just in the somewhat abstract way it always is, but very specifically and painfully. Karen, my bright, beautiful kid, had dropped out of college to try to deal with some difficult personal problems. Ted writes that he was scared by what she was doing, but he could only be with her in whatever way he could, and however she would let him in. In fact, Ted remarked that was why he found himself slip-sliding along the road toward the tavern. Ted says, in addition to my daughter's dilemma, my mother was dying, and my father was clinically depressed. My marriage was unraveling, which pained and disillusioned me and my family, and put my professional future at risk. It actually was the end of the world as I knew it, and I didn't feel at all fine. Ted turned off the drive and went past shops and department stores splendidly decked out for Christmas, bell-ringing Santas, shoppers weaving along everywhere. Ted figured some of them must have felt as disoriented as he did that night. Ted realized that Christmas is a tough time for a lot of people. That year, Ted was experiencing it firsthand. Ted drove through the heart of the shopping district into a section where homeless folk camped out over steam grates in the sidewalks in front of stores whose owners had closed early and pulled down security gates over the windows. Ted turned onto Lombard Street where row houses, eateries, and small shops existed, cheap by Jello. Ted felt lucky to find a parking spot a couple of blocks from the place where he was to meet his daughter. Ted got out of the car and looked around as if walking from a dream, waking from a dream. Then it came to him, 2 lines of a poem that Ted had read years earlier. He didn't know why, just those 2 lines came as clear as the poet's pen, nor did Ted remember any other lines, or even the name of the poet. Only 2 lines. This world is wild as an old wives' tale, and strange the plain things are. The lines came like a visitation. That night, the world did seem wild to Ted, and plain things had become strange. And the night was still young. The sleet had stopped, and the rain was a cold drizzle against Ted's face as he walked down the street toward the tavern. Somewhere on the street, Ted came across a row house where the whole front window was jammed with a manger scene. Judging from the neighborhood houses, at some point, the residents of this one had enlarged the window to twice its original size, probably to accommodate this exhibition. It was something you'd be more likely to see in a department store window than in a row house on Lombard Street in Philadelphia. The painted figures must have been 3 feet tall, and each was lit from inside with a glowing light. It truly was impressive. Ted smiled as he hurried past, silently saluting the piety of the family who gave up yet Ted reflected, strange the plain things are. Ted rushed to meet his daughter Kara, and they ate and talked, but the meeting didn't ease any of Ted's anxiety or Karen's pain. When they left the tavern, the rain had stopped. Father and daughter stood on the corner and said goodbye. They hugged each other for a long time. Ted told his daughter he loved her and asked her to be careful and to stay in touch with him no matter what. Karen promised that she would, and she went off to meet a friend, and Ted began to walk slowly to his car. Ted remembers, I was thinking so hard about my daughter that when I came upon the row house nativity again, I was momentarily caught off guard. This time, I stopped to look at it more closely. There it all was, the group of shepherds, the 3 wise men, a full complement of angels, and a number of assorted animals. They were all gathered around Mary and Joseph, who were side by side with them. Actually, just about where I was standing. That was strange. Ted stepped closer and examined the scene more carefully. His first impression had been right. There was no manger, no infant, no Jesus in the window. In effect, the street was the manger, and Tom was standing in it. Tom said that out of the corner of his eye, he thought he glimpsed someone smiling and nodding in the shadows behind the shepherds. But when he looked again, no one was there. That's when it occurred to Tom that perhaps the street was the manger. Intended or not, the scene was strange. The fragment of the long-forgotten poem crossed his mind. This world is wild as the old wives' tale, and strange the plain things are. Ted wondered what made those words float out of the near chaos of his life to the surface of his mind just when he did. Why had Tom come across that now house nativity scene on his way home to and from the meeting with his daughter that night? An even stranger, Tom writes, was the old familiar story that row house was telling. That night, that old story was being told differently. This time, those silent, lighted figures were looking expectantly out on the street for the Christ child, out on the street where the beasts are motorized now, and milk comes in cartons, and the lamb's wool in worsted suits, and people like shepherds sleep on steam grates, and people like wise men dish out food in soup kitchens, or work in political movements or business coalitions, or in churches to change things so someday there might not be homeless people or hungry children or parents. Tom writes, I stood there with tears in my eyes, with a force that lumped in my throat. I realized that just where I was standing, the Christmas miracle happens. In the street, where human traffic goes endlessly by, where men and women and children live and limp and play and cry and laugh and love and fight and worry and curse and pray and die. Just there, Christmas keeps coming, silently, insistently, mysteriously. Tom turned and walked back to his car, the mystery of it making him lighthearted and lightheaded. He laughed to himself as he thought about a wild stable always being close at hand in this wild world, about the strange saving birth taking place in unlikely places like Lombard Street, where he was walking, taking place anywhere he would ever walk, any street, any again and again in all the unlikely places lining our streets. At tables where we spill coffee and our secrets, in the beds where the sheets get wrinkled and the dreams disturbing, in human exchanges in taverns or cafes, where our hopes for each other and ourselves stumble over our limited power, in the offices where decisions and lives are made, unmade, and somehow remade. It happens in the shops where we search for some item that will be just right but never quite find it. On the corners where we dodge each other in our frantic pace, yet sometimes quickly explore each other's eyes, longing to make human contact in the midst of the rat race. It happens on the steam grates where, once in a while, passers-by fish a coin from their pockets and drop it in the hand of those homeless brothers and sisters. Tom writes, "Ah, yes, strange the plain things are. As Christ come to be close at hand in unlikely people like that row house family and my family, floundering as it was just then, and countless other families on countless other streets. Jesus, born again and again in 1,000 times, 1,000 miracles, 1,000 moments, and on an occasional heart. God close at hand, always." As Tom drove home that night, he thought of his daughter, sons, and all of the pain and struggles they would all go through on their particular versions of Lombard Street. In that moment, Tom knew that nothing could keep him from standing by and with his children. And he thought of other people he loved and those he didn't love very much or at all. And he knew he would do the best he could to stand by and with all of the street people of life, because he had the God-given chance, the small, precious gift of doing something, somewhere. Finally, Tom observed, "It also occurred to me that one of the somethings God does everywhere, and certainly at Christmas, is to bring to an end the world as we know it." It doesn't make me feel fine. It does make me feel better, much better. Because the rest of the something is that then a new world begins in a small explosion of light that no darkness can overcome. Dear friends, tonight as we go out into our world, may we remember Tom, Lombard Street, the Nativity, and the presence of Christ there in all of the streets of our lives. Indeed, may we be part of that small explosion of light that no darkness can overcome. Merry Christmas.